Bienvenue, mes amis. Um, I just spaced welcome. Um, Welcome back to .NET API Review. Once again, I have a scroll bar. Um, Once again, we hope to eliminate the scroll bar by the end of the day. Well, by the end of 2 hours. Let's see how well we can do. First up, we have WinForms add exclude from screen capture API to forms and controls. This is .NET WinForms 13258. Klaus, willkommen.
Yes, thank you. So the basic idea behind that is since we think that there will be in the nearer and far future a lot of tools that for capturing the screen as graphic and then using LLMs to OCR the text for once, but then secondly also to process the context for summary purposes and stuff like that. There might be apps where the apps want their content to be excluded, and there is a list of a couple of things that are in my mind probably interested in not having those tools running in the background, or wanting to generally protect against them. We know that this is not 100% safe way, so there are things around to still capture those things, and of course you cannot protect against someone who is just taking their phone and make a screenshot of the monitor. But still, it's just a basic protection against capturing sensitive data that would otherwise go undetected and that people don't want to include. So there's a API in Windows that allows that. That API has been in Windows since Windows 7 for the purpose of screen recording software. In Windows 10 2004, they added another flag where a whole window can be excluded from the capture, and the reason they did that is that the controls for a screen recording software would not be showing on the video, but this can also be useful in the scenarios written. So the initial idea was to do it on form class, so on window and on control level. I did a couple of tests. I'm no longer sure that the control level is really feasible, but I would need to do a few other tests. But one way or the other, for the form class, that is still the, in my opinion, the right thing to do, and that makes it a pretty much low-hanging fruit. So it's like a screen capture mode that we have then in addition as a property on form, and there are like then the enums that you can set it up. It's allow, hide content, hide window. Hide window would, as I said, work only from Windows 10 version 204 and higher. And there's one thing that so that is basically the idea. So there's one thing that I need to take into account, and that is something that most people, I would assume, won't know about. So a form in WinForms is not necessarily a form. A form can be a control. So which means if you set a couple of properties in WinForms on the form, then you can add a form to a form, which makes it a control, which makes it probably at least discussable what then is going to happen with that property if we don't make the hiding or the obscuring on control level work. And in that case, if we decide not to do it on control level, I would flat out throw an exception if that thing is set to anything else than allow. Yeah, and that is pretty much the concept of the thing.
So, if the user expected behavior of screen capture mode 1 is blackout and of 2 is blur out, why would we call it hide content and hide window? Because those names don't really convey those meanings to me.
Yeah, sorry. The summary is something I overlooked. No, I should have updated those summaries. That has slipped my mind. The summary should read on hide contact the form's contact is hidden, so you would see it is blacked out, and I failed to update that description because it has to be the complete window is hidden, not blurred out. That was the first draft that I had there. I'm sorry.
That's fine. So what would it mean if you set hide window on a control? Is that just going to throw? That it has to be on the top level form?
Yes, because it doesn't make any sense otherwise. And that's also the point with like the special form of a form to act as a control, because then also that doesn't make sense.
Right.
But I have reservation meanwhile, so I did a couple of tests. I have reservations meanwhile to have it on control, and the reason is that I will do a couple of other tests, but if I'm not sure that it can at least, I would say 95% reliably, also in the cases that I cannot test because people obviously inherit from control and do whatever they want. My concern is that because this property would then be there, it would, put a developer in something like a false sense of security, and so that is something that I'm not sure about meanwhile. So yeah, so that's the current state of things, where I'm tending to do it on form, definitely, but yeah.
Okay, chat asks a really good question, and since we happen to have WPF people in the room, should we be doing this for WPF at the same time?
Is that a question that for me or for Pankaj?
Anybody who wants to answer.
Yeah,
I would suggest to do that, but
sorry.
But I know also that the workload is. Go ahead, Pankaj.
Yeah, same thing. I was about to say the same thing. Right now, we are not like this is not something that we have planned. Like we'll see how the API shapes and forms, and then we can see if it makes sense to have this in WPF as well.
Fair enough. I guess really it's do we know enough of what it would look like in WPF that we can approve the shape right now, or would you need to do further work before you have a proposal?
It's certainly more work in WPF. We're just rendering GDI plus, GDI, and whatever the desktop window manager does then. But I would figure that in, given the DirectX context and everything, should also work, but I think it's more work to do in WPF.
Okay, and we can wait until WPF brings it forward if we don't know where we would put these things yet. Okay, and then I guess I got the sense that you are suggesting we go ahead and put the enum mode on both form and control.
I mean, the enum is independent, just like
I mean,
just the
sorry,
enum.
just
Yeah,
the new
would it?
property, putting it on both form and
So
control.
yeah, we need. So since form is like in the inheritance hierarchy, also derived from control, that
Okay.
would be a necessity then. And we would just throw for the like second set the third setting when it's not a form,
Okay,
as
so
we would
so
throw if the form is not a form,
right.
which also can be. Yeah,
Okay, so if we put it on control, we don't need it on form because if we put it on control, it's already on form.
exactly.
Okay. And so I guess just going back, hide window is it's not the process, it's the window.
Yes,
Okay. Just
and it's not blurred. It's just
yeah.
you only see it on the monitor.
I'm
But
I'm ignoring what the
no one.
words say and just making sure that
Yeah. I'm
the
going to update that.
hide window is that it's
It's
the
just
window, not the
self-describing.
process, and
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think if it makes sense to put it on, if individual controls can support it, then I think it's fine to put it on control. The if it doesn't, then moving it to form seems fine. And the names seem fine to me given the updated description of what they do.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to opine?
One question. If we have this at control level, then the height window, does that make sense? Like, I mean, I'm talking about the nomenclature here. Like, uh, for a control level, allow and hide content is sort of meaningful, but if the control is part of a user control that is shipping and sitting inside a form like some area, what does hide window mean for that particular control?
I mean, we have a couple of cases where we have that like problem with the inheritance that certain settings don't make sense. I don't have an example on the top of my head, but it's just that since a form is a special kind of control in the WinForm sense, since it's a top level window, but it's still derived from control. We always run into a couple of things that aren't from the. Is that also the English word nomenclature? No, I don't know.
You're
like
right. Nomenclature.
Nomenclature, okay. A little bit off. Let's put it that way. And yes, you're right. It wouldn't make any sense, but then we would just have that second options to satisfy that. I would. The alternative would be just to have a completely different property for form, and while that would make more sense in terms of the naming, I think I would rather live with a compromise to have a setting that would not apply to control, and then end up in form, and it's a consistency up the hierarchy. That's my take.
Also, like this control is this property is going to be a public property, right? So technically, if the control sets its screen capture mode as not to allow anything, then I can still inherit it and sort of override it and sort of have it on the screen, right? Like that is how we are designing this API to be, right? Because an API author would have expected, like, I'm making a control that is not supposed to be captured anywhere, but somebody can sort of inherit it and have this property overridden, right? I'm just trying to make sense of, like, this is what we are opening up to.
But I mean, you can pretty much change the whole behavior of any property that is on control or on on form when you are starting inheriting your own controls and no longer make sense of them because everybody can hook into the WND proc in WinForms and change the behavior completely. So, I mean, that's up to the developer. If they want to confuse their customers by doing that, then at a certain point, I would say it's on them. It's always that we have an intended usage of the API, and if they change it completely, then like it cannot prevent them from doing that. So I'm not sure if I got that is the answer to your question, or if you ask something differently. But
No,
that
that was the question. Like that is
okay.
I'm all convinced.
Yeah.
So right now we're considering the alternative proposal to add it to control and not form.
Yes. Pending a few tests that I want to make, and just my own decision that when I'm not feeling comfortable, or when I talk to Jeremy Kuhne and he agrees that it's too much of a risk to. I mean, ultimately, it's in the hands of the developer that inherits the control. Again, same thing that Mankash just addressed. They should make sure that if they implementing the control, that they obey to certain standards, and if they don't, then it's on them. But I just want to find out a couple of edge cases and then decide if it's really as easy as I think it is. Then I would go for control. But when I have like second thoughts, then I would like take the freedom and say no. It would be overpromising, or the risk that a developer would overpromise is too high. That would be my reservation for it.
To be clear though, like custom control vendors aren't going to have to like update their code for this to work, right? Like the setter will work on.
And that's my point. They shouldn't.
Right.
It should work just out of the box because it's implemented on control level. But that's exactly the things that I need to test, because let's say someone is already using it. I mean, it's an API that you can implement or something like that. Then it could not break the existing behavior if you just not use it, but it would probably interfere with it in a way that they didn't see it. I'm not so I would just I need to do a couple of tests actually around taking controls from the 3 or 4 really big third-party vendors, take a look at if they're using it in scenarios that is different from what we figured, and then that would be something to take into account with that.
And like 2 more quick questions. I'm sorry if it has been covered, but like if you set hide window on a non-form control, I assume that will like throw an invalid operation exception. Yeah. All right. And then also I just was reading the comments, like, and I saw people were asking for Windows 11 blur for the screenshots. Why not? I was just curious.
So when I have ideas, let's put it that way, they come and go very quickly in my head. So I'm tend to writing them directly in what I have, and then I pivot on them as I see before I go to the team and discuss them more. So I had a couple of additional ideas that would have been nice, but giving the time, the 2 things that I had in mind, namely getting notified if someone attempts to do a screen capture is not feasible. It's not feasible at all. and the blurring would be cool in a way, but is something that actually is too domain specific already. If like, it's like, and I mean, there's also the point that I don't think, because this is nothing we can just hand over to Windows, to the Windows API, which means it becomes something that we have to do, and giving the time that we have, or rather not have, but it's nothing for Windows 10 and 4 to discuss this. So that's the background of why was it there first and why did it disappear.
I see. I just assumed it would be easy. That'd be like similar to hide content or something, but just like different enums for the native API. But seems good to me. And then I guess this will throw a lot of platform not supported exceptions on older Windows.
Well, actually, I mean, it would work. So the hide window is working from Windows 10 to 4 up. The hide contact is there since Windows 7, and actually, I don't even know we support. Is Windows 10 supported on Windows 7?
I assume you meant .NET 10 on Windows 7. Windows 10 on Windows 7 doesn't make any sense.
So, which means
I think our answer is we try not to break things, but if things get broken, we don't care.
yeah. But I mean, so yeah, I would cautiously assume that everything below Windows 10 or maybe out of support anyway, but I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I guess the one thing I'd want to
support.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Tanner.
I was just saying Windows 7 and 8 and 8.1 are all out of support, and we officially dropped support for Windows 7 back in like .NET 8. But like Jeremy said, we generally don't make intentional changes that would break it from working on Windows 7 if someone tried to install it. But we've also made multiple changes to the runtime and things, and it might not actually work anymore. I don't think anyone's explicitly testing or trying because it's out of support.
I mean, we have a couple of things that only work from a certain Windows version on in WinForms, and check it. And if it doesn't work, then I think we throw or we ignore the setting, depending on what we're doing. And so this is nothing special in that regard.
I agree. This is more like PR feedback than API
Yeah,
feedback.
yeah.
I was just kind of making a point that I think throwing's better since there's like maybe a security angle there if people thought this was doing something it wasn't.
I would do that.
But yeah, I think it's good. I would be okay with approving it.
Anyone else? Sold. Danke, Klaus.
Thank you. Cool. Vielen Dank.
Bis später. Alright. Expose API to return the legacy propagator .NET Runtime 114584. Tarek.
Yes, I can talk about this one. Okay, so today we have a type is called distributed context propagator. This type actually is used to encode and decode the trace context and baggage related to the tracing to the format that it can be transferred over the wire. So today this type is used by HTTP, like while outbound, transmissions for HTTP headers. Also, it's used by ASP.NET while receiving the HTTP headers from there. Today we have the default propagator, so set as the default one. This propagator is emitting the stuff on the form of the legacy before introducing the W3C specification. So there is a difference. When we used to split that, emit that, we used like all the ways that Microsoft was doing it. Using some specific header names like correlation, context, and so on, which is changed by the specification later, by W3C. So today, our default is the old way. Internally we call it legacy. And we in .NET 10 we are implementing a W3C new propagator, which can be working according to the W3C specification. And we are willing to put this new W3C propagator as the default one. So the issue here is if somebody want to get into the old behavior again, they need to get instance of the legacy propagators that we used to have. And the API proposal here is to expose a new API inside the distributed context propagator just to return this instance of the legacy propagator. Of course, I got some comment from Steven, if we can have a better name than legacy, and I agree with that. But we have proposing alternative names here. I'm not sure about which one really is the best, but the first 2 or 3 of them, in the alternative names, make sense to me. Make more sense to me. All of them is good, but the first 3, make sense for naming. Yeah, so this is the proposal. To have API return the instance of legacy propagator so users can set it back if they need to.
Tara, can I ask, how likely do we think it is that people will need to, if I understood correctly, we're changing the behavior of create default propagator, right? So create default propagator will be the new W3C format rather than the old one.
Yeah, that's right.
Do we expect lots of people to switch back, or could it, what would happen if we just made this a config switch to revert the default propagator behavior?
I'm not expecting many people, will switch back, but there could be some cases that people need to switch back.
And
would they need to? Oh, sorry.
I was just going to ask quickly. Would that how many times does someone do this in their program? Is it one place that they set it up, and so having a global config switch would be fine, or would they need W3C in one place and the legacy behavior in another place?
Yeah, so I believe HTTP sockets, they have inside their handler, I think they can put the propagators there that they can be used inside the socket, so it can be configured there. Yeah, but we are talking about the default here, which is global for the everything. If HTTP is using this default, the HTTP handler, the default one.
What did someone do previously if they wanted to opt into the W3C behavior?
We got some complaints already. From OpenTelemetry and other guys about because we are emitting wrong headers, which doesn't conform to the W3C.
Oh, so we don't support the W3C at all today. There's no way to get that behavior today.
No.
I see.
And this includes on the server side. So I guess that was my question, is if I have a .NET 10 client connecting to a .NET 8 server running Kestrel and all of that, Like, will I need to use the legacy propagator for everything to flow properly?
No, I mean, like if you take like ASP.NET as example, so ASP.NET today can read both headers. I mean, the W3C and the legacy one. Like
I see.
Like,
So we just had no option to emit the new headers, but you're already
right.
correctly
Yeah,
consuming
just
it.
the emitting is a piece that, yeah.
Well, that helps. And so previously, for the headers we were emitting, were we trying to follow W3C and just not following it closely enough, or was there another specification we were following at the time?
No, we are trying to follow the W3C specification. Yeah, this is
now. Sorry, then, like what we're currently doing, like was there anything that we were trying to follow?
Yeah, today, I mean, like, you know, as I mentioned about like we are emitting stuff with old way. I mean, like header name, the header name for the package is wrong. I mean, it's different than W3C specification.
Where did we get it from back then? Like, where did we come up with the header names?
Did we make up? Is the legacy propagator a protocol of our own invention, or is it following some other standard?
No, it was not following any standard. It's Microsoft stuff.
Got it.
Because like we didn't have, I think, I mean, I was not there during that time, but we didn't have a specification at that time, so we have to come up with our things.
Yeah. So I agree with Steve's meta point, and I'll say it a different way. API is forever. So if we make create correlation context propagator as public API, even if we choose to drop support for it in 5 years, the method has to exist forever. It can throw, but it has to exist. If we think that almost no one is ever going to want this should just be an app context switch, and then we don't care if we stop supporting it. But if it's going to be like more than 10% of people interacting with distributed context propagators want the old thing, then we should name it, and we definitely shouldn't name it anything involving the word legacy. Because if we change the default a second time, legacy becomes ambiguous.
First, I'm not expecting we obsolete this propagator at all. I mean, like it will exist, even few people is going to use it. Yeah, and yeah. Second, about like having a config switch I don't think it's enough, because like we see some users, I mean, doing their own custom propagator, and they just wrapping other propagators to do something with it. So it's like, imagine like composite propagator. I mean, like it can wrap like the legacy one and add some extra features to it. So if we have the config switch, I don't think they can do that. The other thing is like config switch is process wide. I mean, I don't think you can have it like per library or per some scenario. Yeah, so I would say like config switch is not perfect in these scenarios.
I'm looking at a little bit of the history, and I'm pretty sure we were following a W3C spec at the time. It's just, it was a draft, and they changed correlation context to baggage.
Yeah, my understanding is like when we expose this. Okay, this is not about distributed context propagator, the type itself, because the type is exposed like 2 years ago. But before that, I mean, like HTTP was emitting stuff by themselves without any propagator, so they were splitting it with trace context and this stuff. I mean, correlation context headers. And the reason is, as I mentioned about like initially, I mean, when we did that, I mean, there was no really specification. And later, I mean, W3C was proposing some specification. It was not finalized, and we continue using correlation context stuff. But now, I mean, like the specification is stable, and everybody's using it, and and we need to conform to this specification because this is kind of the standard now.
Yeah, my concern with the name Legacy is in 5-10 years the standard changes and we update to the new standard, and now we have Create Legacy Propagator and Create Legacy Propagator 2. Of which legacy propagator were you trying to extend?
Right. That was what led me to comment on the name in the first place. Is legacy is sort of a moment in time naming,
Yeah.
and it doesn't really quantify what it's in relation to.
Yeah, so like of all of these names, one that describes what this propagator was doing seems the best to me.
Yes, I agree with that. I mean, like, the name legacy is not, I mean, it's obvious for internal people,
Right.
but it's not obvious for public. I mean, like,
Yeah, and it's totally
Well,
fine
the
for an
alternative
internal
names.
class name, but
We could also do something like the first one, create pre W3C or create non W3C.
well,
And then if there was a new version of W3C, we'd have a, create W3C V1
yeah, the
or whatever.
the problem with
default
non
would become.
W3C would be is if the next standard comes from who does things in this space, Adobe.
Right.
So then we have create non W3C,
I-
create
Also,
W3C, and
it's-
create Adobe.
I doubt,
Yeah.
I
It's
doubt
also
there
a
would be-
W3 standard. Like it is W3C. It's just an outdated draft.
Yeah.
Wait, is that true?
Yes, I just look at your chat. I just linked to it. Yeah, we
Does
implemented the
that draft
standard.
have a number, a date, a name?
Yeah, just wait. I mean, like, okay, our implementation is not conforming to W3C, period. I mean, like, when we are emitting package, for example, I mean, like, we are skipping the keys. The specs doesn't, W3C says that you don't have to spare, you shouldn't escape the keys characters.
But there's
The
no.
other thing is,
Sorry,
is like,
you're saying there's no standard or draft version of any standard that ours relates to, but Stefan, you're saying that it does.
We tried to at the time. I mean, that's why I asked about it. Like, I remember, like, we tried to follow W3C. Like, we might not have been perfect, but like to imply that we weren't, I think is wrong. We were trying to do like W3C distributed tracing or whatever it was at the time. Like,
yeah, I can see that, but we are not conforming to the specification. I mean, we are different.
right? Just I'm objecting to non W3C. That's all. Like, I'm not.
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if people
I-
like
I
pre
think-
W3C, that's fine, I guess. But again, let's assert that the next version comes from Dunkin' Donuts, and then we have create pre W3C propagator, create W3C propagator, and create Dunkin' Donuts propagator. Like, does pre W3C tell you? It tells you it's older than W3C.
We also don't have create W3C propagator, right? We have create default propagator. So it's not
Right.
even clear if you have pre. So I would lean towards an app context switch. I understand that's scary because, like, we release every year, and if we needed a public API, we can't add one mid-cycle. But like, this is like
Context-
static anyway. This is like globally like you're setting .current in the example. But yeah.
Config switch is not going to work, as I mentioned.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. Why is that?
First, about like, you have like something like the socket handler today, you can configure the propagator. So how you will do it with the config switch?
Well, it changed the default behavior.
How
The
you
default
change
create default propagator
Yeah, how you change the default behavior?
with an app context switch. I mean, it's hand wavy, but why can't you?
We added the socket option, propagator option for the handler for a specific reason, because we want to have the control about like not using the default and use your own propagator. So you are saying that using the default is overriding this.
Right. I mean, you could easily have the app context switch change the behavior of the default. Like, that doesn't seem crazy. I mean, unless there's some reason you can't, obviously. I don't know the code as well as you. But like, it seems like it should be easy to change the default propagator behavior with an app context switch.
I'm not sure if the config switch is still working. I mean, like, I'm not getting it. Imagine, like, somebody want to set specific propagator, the legacy one, to the socket handler, for example, and the global is W3C, and changing the global is going to cause other problems.
Right,
So,
that's why it's scary. That's why I said it's scary not to add a public API. Yeah, to that point, if someone did need to use one propagator in one place and one propagator in the other in the same process, you would need an API, clearly. But do they?
Why is that?
No, I'm just agreeing with you. Like, app context switch is like global to the process. So like, I'm just agreeing, like stipulating that, yeah, if someone wants to set it on like a specific, like if they want the legacy behavior on a specific Sockets HTTP handler, you need a public API. I'm just agreeing. But like, do people actually need that?
So I'm seeing this is, I mean, this proposal is not different than what we used to work even. Like, today the default propagator is returning the legacy one, and we exposed another methods, as you see, about like create pass-through propagator and no output propagator and this stuff. I mean, it's the same idea about like, if you don't like the default, you can get the instance of any of those and you can set it and use it. I mean, I'm not seeing adding this create whatever the new pre-W3C propagator, I mean, is going to change anything from the original design of this class.
So, okay, I was hoping that like maybe we could convince you that you wouldn't need to change the setting for different applications in the same process, and then we wouldn't need any new API. But given that like you think that's necessary, the naming's the hard part, right? So some people are like, maybe create pre-W3C propagators, okay, but that isn't very clear without a W3C propagator, right? Just from a naming perspective, from an API clarity perspective, even if the default propagator is that. Right. But if we have to do that, I would just go with create correlation context propagator or something. I don't know, like, it's fine.
Yes, I'll second while we're adding a way to get the one that's no longer going to be the default, should we go ahead and preemptively name the one that is now the default?
Okay, so what is the suggestion here exactly? I mean, like...
So we pick one of these names for your current proposal, and then we also add create W3C propagator.
Okay, because like
default is I don't care. Give me an answer. Yeah, default is I don't care. Create W3C is I want W3C. Default will just return W3C. But that's an implementation detail.
This would be fine with me.
Okay, so what name do we like? If there was a draft W3C version that we could name specifically, then I would like that. If people really like pre-W3C, that's fine. Otherwise, describing it based on what it did or what it does differently, which would be create correlation context, would be my choice.
Yeah, I'm fine with that name. Also, I want to point out like our documentation should be detailed about the behavior of that propagator.
Yeah, I mean, should we call the default like create baggage propagator and the old one create correlation context propagator?
The propagator is not propagating baggage only or
Okay,
It propagates the trace context also, which has
that's true.
trace parent, trace state.
All right, so you like W3C and pre-W3C.
Yeah.
Yep. And then chat asked, how does activity ID format correlate with this?
Yeah, so in activity, we have two supported format. I mean, for activity, the legacy one, we call it hierarchical, and the second one, which is W3C. So the new propagator is going to support W3C only. So all the activities that created with hierarchical, I mean, format is not going to be propagated through this propagator. But this is related only to trace context. I mean, specifically the trace parent, which is the ID that conform to the W3C specification. Yeah, this looks good to me.
Stefan and Steve, you've both been vocal. You happy with what's on screen?
Yeah.
It's fine. And the create default propagator will just delegate to the W3C one. That's the idea.
Yeah. All right. Done. Thank you, Tarek. Shukran.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. WPF. Simplified grid, column, and row definitions. WPF 9802.
Yeah, hello everyone. So this API aims to simplify the definition, syntax of row definitions and column definitions in grid layout. The API is designed to enhance the user experience by supporting shorthand syntax similar to MAUI and WinUI. So the primary goal of this API is to allow rows and columns within a grid to be defined by a collection that is delimited by columns or spaces as shown in the API usage box, proposed syntax box. So this will be achieved by creating a type converter for the collections that will enable to process the strings given as input to the corresponding column definition collection and row definition collection. So as we have already seen in the usage that a user will provide a comma delimited or space delimited value, and we will create the corresponding column definition and collection and row definition collection for the grid. So this approach involves adding a public setter for the column definitions and row definitions properties in grid, allowing them to be assigned via XAML. And an internal type converter will handle parsing provided string syntax into column definition and row definitions objects. So to limit the scope of this API, we have kept the type converters as internal for now. So yeah, this is all about this API proposal.
First, I'll start with a technical question. Are type converters on public properties allowed to refer to internal types?
Yeah, there are some instances of internal type converter here in WP.
Okay. And then there's a framework general guideline that says collection properties shouldn't be settable. I understand the scenario. Just do we have? Is there prior art that says that this is the right way to do it, or is it technically the only way to do it, or?
So we need to support the XAML hot reload working with the Visual Studio. So to have that support, we are required to provide a public setter, and the MAUI has also provided a public setter for the column definitions and row definitions in their framework.
And will any extremely bad things happen if somebody creates one column definition collection and assigns it to multiple column definition properties on different objects?
Yeah, so we are safeguarding on all those bases. Like we have safeguarded safeguarded the API by keeping the type converter as internal. And since the constructor of this row definition collection and column definition collections are also internal, so the user may not be able to create an independent column definitions or row definitions without an owning grid. So this scenario will be handled in that way.
So is the setter like not setting? Is it copying the data out?
Technically, the user will not be able to use the setter from the C# code behind, because they were not able to implement any independent column definitions and row definitions. But we are using it from the XAML part only. So in the XAML part, we are using the type converter. We are creating a placeholder column definitions, and then it will swap up with the existing column definitions in the grid.
Right, but if you called the getter on one grid, so you have two grids, you read grid A dot column definitions and you do grid B dot column definitions equal that, you now have the same collection on two grids. Is that going to cause? I mean, you can say
no,
don't do that, but is it going to cause problems?
No, we are safeguarding from that. We have those conditions in our setter, so that one column definition cannot have two owning grid. And if a column definitions already have a owning grid, it cannot be assigned to another grid as a column definition.
So given that you're putting all these safeguards in the setters, have you thought about making the call and row definition collections publicly constructible? I saw some people asking for that. I don't know. Is there a reason that's not desirable?
Sorry, my connection got interrupted. Can you please ask the question again?
And, I'm not, a WPF developer, so tell me if I'm just totally off base. But I just reading the comments, and people are asking if they could construct like a column definition collection. Right now the constructor is internal, so since you have these guards and the setters and stuff that a grid can only have one owner and stuff, seems like you're closer to be able to work with these in your code behind or whatever and just use them like normal objects, but you can't construct one. Is there any reason or to keep it internal? Or
so right now we have kept this all internal to limit the scope of this API to only have the shorthand syntax support. But in future, maybe we can have that as a public constructor and all.
Got it. Yeah, I like the new syntax. It looks convenient.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. I assume this is for system Windows controls grid.
Yes.
Okay. Look at me finding where I put buttons on my keyboard.
Can I quickly ask again, what was the reason again why the type converter is internal?
So we right now keep this as internal to limit the scope of this API. since the constructor of the column definition collection and row definition collection is also internal, so we have kept this as internal as well. So to keep the harmony going on with the current infrastructure, we might make it public in the next iteration of this. But right now, to support to limit the scope of our API to just support the shorthand syntax, we have kept them as internal.
Yeah, my question had a background, but I think it's just beyond the scope. I'm looking for a way also to like simplify the use of the table layout control in WinForms, and could be there are a couple of things that if we had them from WPF, like up the hierarchy, similar to iCommand, then we could just share a couple of concepts better. But I think that is absolutely beyond the scope of this. So yeah, just thinking out loud. Oh, thanks.
Any other comments? Once? Twice? Sold. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All right. Do we have Steve today? Harder? Okay. Does anybody else want to talk about this one? Or we skip it again? All right. Mark dynamically accessed member types.all is editor browsable never 114197. Nobody's talking. I read enough about it. Basically, they're saying using all is sloppy and creates bloat in the trimming. So, to discourage people from using all, they want to EB never it. Seems fine to me.
I feel like that's an abuse of EB never. Maybe. I don't know.
I mean, it seems better than obsoleting it.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a big change, I suppose. We can always undo it and so forth.
That's true. This is one of the few undoable changes.
Yeah.
My only feedback on this one is it almost seems like there should, instead of being EB never, or maybe in addition to EB never, it feels like there should be an analyzer basically saying, you've used all, don't do that, here's why. You probably want to be more specific instead.
I prefer that. Like, especially if it does something that is like usually what you don't want, but like we're still saying that it's like potentially useful. I'm not sure. Like, it's one thing when it's only the compiler that's supposed to call an API or something. But like, if we think real people are supposed to call this API, like, it's kind of mean to those real people working in Visual Studio to EB never it.
I mean,
Yeah, and I don't personally mind if it's EB nevered or not. My only consideration is really that if we're really recommending people don't need to use it, then the primary consideration should also be getting people who are already using it off of it. In which case an analyzer seems like it's a better or additional fit on top of this.
yeah, I mean, I think I would disagree with you on primary. I think I respect the the intent here, which is that the primary intent is to stop new people from using it, because the people that are already using it is a controllable thing. The future is infinite, but yeah, I think that that both is a good idea. And again, this is undoable.
Yeah.
All right. Approved with snark. Add minimal query verb support to HTTP client 114489. Nobody?
We got asked about this on the server side recently too, because it got standardized. Kind of like on the client, it's not too hard to like, you know, call map, you know, and accept kind of any verb and check, or pass a string, like with HTTP client, right? You can do up a HTTP method with a string, but it's standardized now. People seem excited to use it. So we should align, probably, like whether we do map query and stuff like this. But in .NET's a little different. Like we don't have map for everything, so we'll probably hold off on query. But yeah, we'll see. But yeah, I think it's recently ratified. Is that what the issue says? New maturity level.
I still see it as draft.
Yeah. Okay. What did they say? Is reaching the proposed standard maturity level. So okay, maybe it's still a little early, but it seems on track.
I mean, all the HTTP method is a strongly typed string, right?
Yeah.
So this is just saying we know that there is a verb spelled Query.
Right. So they're not asking you to add like a query async yet. We'll see if it becomes that popular. This is like the minimal you could do. Yeah.
Yeah. I think saying we are aware that there is an HTTP method entitled, or an HTTP method spelled Query, I think that's fine to add to the enum. Sorry, the
I think
strongly typed string class.
Yeah, I'm leaning that direction as well. As much as there's like a risk of jumping onto standards too early with like W3C distributed tracing, I mean, query has been used for a while, like without the standard being ratified.
And I assume any changes are talking about how they want the verb to be handled, not people have been debating the spelling of the verb since the proposal is the HTTP query method.
Yeah, I think approving is fine.
Okay, and a namespace. Semicolon. Hit the right button like 4 times in a row.
Yeah, and those who haven't already looked it up who are curious, it's basically like a get, but you can have a body. Not that a get couldn't have a body before, but the standards strongly discouraged you and said you were a bad person.
All right, and now for a big meaty issue that people are going to want to tune out for, but I would appreciate if you didn't. MLChem .NET Runtime 114453. Kevin, do you want to talk or do you want me to talk?
I have a feeling it's going to be a good mix of both of us. I can start.
Okay.
As part of .NET 10, we have prototyped and implemented some new post-quantum algorithms. This one is MLChem. It is, in addition to being a post-quantum algorithm, it is also one of our first chems as well. So there's going to be some greenfield terminology here, like decapsulate and encapsulate. And for some context on these are also going to be oobed in the Microsoft BCL cryptography package, which had some influence in the API shape. And we'll discuss that as it pops up. Do you want to start with the MLChem class itself, the algorithm? I didn't have the types in a particular order.
I'll start by pointing out. So we have existing asymmetric algorithm types, RSA, DSA, ECDSA, and EC-Diffie-Hellman. They all extend the abstract class asymmetric algorithm. Asymmetric algorithm provides very little value, and it has concepts like key size that really don't make sense with any of the new algorithms. So there are going to be 4 for the Wave 1 post-quantum crypto in .NET. All 4 similar in that they are just directly extending object and idisposable. There will be no base class that they share. They will share some concepts, but that's it. So this is an intentionally breaking away from what we've done in the past.
Yeah, we're kind of taking the opportunity to make some changes to make the API shape how we would have done it probably 25 years ago, if we could go back in time. In particular, the ways that we load keys are not you create an instance and then import a key. The act of importing the key gives you back a key instance, which is in all of the static key loaders down at the bottom. That's one of the main breakaways from asymmetric algorithm, and that gives us all sorts of nice behaviors, like the instances, once they're instantiated, with the exception of dispose, they're pretty much immutable at that point, which is not true when you can import keys into existing instances. The classes themselves, though, are designed to be extensible. So you can see the initial MLChem is abstract. In the same sense that RSA is, we expect there's going to be some platform-specific implementations of this that get exposed. So like our other primitives that we have today, if you are trying to just say, I want MLChem and I don't care about what the implementation does, and I have no opinions about platform-specific behaviors, you're just going to say mlchem dot generate key or import key or load key, whatever. If you are looking to do platform specific behaviors, or you want an mlchem that is backed by something completely different, like an HSM or some network service like Azure Key Vault, whatever, then those would be derived types that you just simply instantiate. So for that reason, this class is abstract, and the only thing the protected constructor takes is the MLChem algorithm, which is a strongly typed string of the known NIST algorithms with some information hanging off of them that will be useful for interacting.
Since we're doing the strongly typed strings differently in this one, do you want to just go ahead and start with MLChem algorithm, Kevin?
Sure. So for MLChem algorithm, it is a strongly typed string of the algorithm identifier, which is denoted by the name property, and there's 3 of them that we have right now: MLChem 512, MLChem 768, and MLChem 1024. The constructor is internal. You will not be able to say, oh, I'm an MLChem 90210 or anything like that. So the only way that you can interact with these is to use the static accelerators to get an instance off of them. And then we have instance properties that return information about the MLChem algorithm, such as the size of the ciphertext it produces, the size of its decapsulation key, which is roughly the private key that decrypts, encapsulation key, private key that encrypts, the size of the seed, and then the size of the shared secret, which all of them are domain-specific terms that are used in the FIPS pub. So while they might be new terminology that we haven't used for other algorithms, but because this is our first chem, they are the appropriate terms. So yes, those nice numbers right there. We gave them better names than NQ and the bottom table 3 has the more the N and Q are the matrix sizes, or lattice sizes, I should say. So I think the only other point of interest on these is it has IEquatable and it has these static operators. I chose to have these static operators on there for 2 reasons. One, there's really 2 schools of thought here, which is, since the only way you can instantiate this thing is to use the static properties, which gives you back memoized instances of these things, then reference equality is a meaningful way of comparing these things. So what's the point of implementing the operators in IEquatable? The reason why I like the operators is 2 reasons. The first is, since this is down level and we'll be targeting .NET Framework, while C# will use reference equality for the operators, VB.NET will not. It will tell you, I don't know how to compare these things. You have to implement the equality operators for VB.NET to compile. The other reason is there are some static analysis tools out there that will tell you, hey, you're doing reference equality. And reference equality for like 99% of developers is a smell for you're maybe comparing things that shouldn't be compared. Since I went ahead with the operators, it made sense to override equals. Since you're overriding equals, that means overriding get hash code. And since you've done all of that, you might as well implement IEquatable, because it is perfectly valid to put these things as dictionary keys or in lists or whatever.
Yeah. Whereas my opinion was, it's a class, reference equality, we don't need IEquatable. But if other people are fine having it, I don't care.
I care. I'm less opinionated about the interface and more opinion about the equality operators for those platforms that actually want them, or sorry, those ecosystems or languages that want them. And since we've already said, okay, we can't just allow the compiler to do its default thing because its default thing might be not work, we might as well just implement the whole thing everywhere.
Fair enough. All right.
Okay.
Crickets go to Kevin. Congratulations, Kevin.
So there's no being like VB, you have to call object.reference equals if you want to compare these things. That's not a consideration. Just simplify it entirely.
I mean, you can, but I mean, if these things are identifiers and they're meant to be compared, that's the point.
Okay.
Forcing people to go through the hoop of saying, I want to see if these two things are equal by saying object.reference equals thing one and thing two, as opposed to just using the equal sign. That was the main motivation.
Got it. If it's like a core scenario, and we do care about VB, then I'm fine with just doing the whole equals thing.
It's also what we do for other things where we've had string identifiers like CNG algorithm. It also does IEquatable and has the equality operators. So there's some fire art for that as well. So the MLChem has the protected constructor that tells that it requires what algorithm are you. It needs that so that it can use all those properties that hang off of the algorithm, like understanding what the size of the keys are. Like we do for other primitives that we've recently introduced, like Cha-Cha-20 Poly 1305 and SHA-3, we have a static is supported. And it does what you think. It returns true if your platform can do MLChem, and it returns false if it cannot. We have our property that return.
I'll say with is supported for MLChem for MLChem. We don't know of or anticipate any platforms that will support some algorithms, but not all of them. So just one is supported, which is supposed to indicate full or nothing. And this is, like the other algorithms, this is supported is saying if the static operators, or if the static methods on this class will function. If you could be on Windows 7 using Key Vault with MLChem, and your MLChem instance will work because it's using Key Vault, not the OS. But this will still say is supported false because it's saying MLChem.generate key is going to throw. It's yay statics and derived types.
And I guess we would expect anyone that's implementing this is supported to shadow it with their own implementation, if it makes sense. We have our property for what algorithm are you, which is basically just what the constructor sets. And then we get into decapsulate, which is roughly, so the general way that MLChem works is a party starts with a call to encapsulate, which is the one further down below. It produces two things, a ciphertext and a shared secret, and those are the right terms. The other party, and so the party that calls encapsulate, it keeps the shared secret that gets generated for itself, and then it sends the ciphertext back to the other party. The other party decapsulates that ciphertext to get the shared secret, and now both parties have a shared secret without ever having actually directly communicated it to each other. It's a very similar process to Diffie-Hellman. But roughly, decapsulate means decrypt and encapsulate means encrypt, but we don't use those terms because they're not general purpose decrypt and encrypt things. They decapsulate and encapsulate. The general model is we have our core methods. So for decapsulate, the ciphertext is something that is read and turned into a shared secret. So for the decapsulate core, implementers will implement decapsulate core, and the 3 methods above it will use those, use that abstract to accomplish it, the work. The thing to note with this is, so decapsulate core assumes that all of its inputs are going to be valid. The ciphertext must be exactly the right size of the ciphertext. The shared secret must be exactly the right size of the shared secret, which are known based on the MLChem algorithm. Decapsulate with a read-only span, the second from bottom one of the decapsulate group. It's a void, and it has an out shared secret bytes written. So you have a ciphertext, you want to write the shared secret to a buffer. Maybe it's rented, maybe it's something that you've pinned so that you can clear it out later. One thing to note with MLChem decapsulation and encapsulation keys is they are generally very big. We do not expect people to use the stack for a lot of this work. One of the side effects of that is that most of the spans are always going to be heap buffers rather than the stack.
Excepting shared secret, which is 32 bytes.
Except
currently.
shared secret, which currently there could be another one that that does that. The ciphertext is generally very large. The seeds are generally small, but the keys are also large. It has an out int for shared secret bytes written because we can't overload on return type, which is the one above it. The only difference between the 2 middle ones is the top one that doesn't have the out int assumes that your shared secret buffer is precisely sized. That is a theme that we're going to kind of see a bit in this algorithm. Not as many tries as we're used to, and most of the buffers are going to be assumed they are the exact right size needed to work with them if you're writing to a destination buffer.
And by assumed, you mean asserted, right? Of it will fail if it's the wrong size.
Correct.
Yeah.
It'll throw. It'll say it'll give you an arg exception saying that's not the right size buffer. Try again. So for the second one from the top of decapsulate without the out int, if the shared secret buffer is not the right size, it will throw an argument exception for shared secret. Your shared secret is not the right size.
Did you consider just returning the int in every case?
That is something that I've gone back and forth on, and one of the things that comes back that we had with SHA, when we originally added all the span in the one-shots for SHA 2 or SHA 3, is they return ints of how much was written, and some of the feedback that I got on those was SHA 256 always writes 32 bytes, yet you return an int. People feel uncomfortable not doing something with that int, discarding it, but on the other hand, it is never going to return anything other than the value. And we could also get rid of the second decapsulate and say, if you don't want the shared secrets by written, you can just discard it, but people don't like using the discard either. That's very similar to ignoring the return. And we can't just, so yes, we could just say return the int, but people are going to do something with it. They're going to assert it. They're going to check it. And I think people feel more comfortable when it doesn't return something, just knowing that it's going to throw if it's not the right size.
Right. So okay, and the one without the smaller one throws for too large spans.
Yes.
Yeah, this
So
one
it's
is
like
equals and
built-in
this one is greater than or
validation.
equals.
Yeah, makes sense. So I see it. Is this the first time we're using decapsulate and a .NET API? I see it's in the spec, in the standard, but I keep on hearing like decapitate. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I started getting semantic satiation from saying decapsulate so much while I was working on this that it kind of lost all meaning. Just decapsulate. I couldn't say the word anymore. So I'm with you on that one. Yes,
You should stick with
is
it,
the
though.
first. Yeah, it is the right term. Like calling it anything else, people would be very confused. It's a term that was chosen for us. But since it's our first chem, it's the first time we're using it in .NET.
Yeah. It does appear that Windows Networking VPN has a type IVPN plugin that has a verb decapsulate. So APIs of .NET actually already has a hit on it. I don't know what Windows Networking VPN is, but it's something Emo scanned. Today I learned.
So,
Interesting.
so just going back to the out int, that out int is only ever gonna be like 0 or I mean some error value, and or it's gonna be like 32, right?
For now, yes. The NIST paper makes it pretty clear that the shared secret size is a property of the algorithm, not a fundamental thing of MLChem. There could be an MLChem 2048 in the future where the shared secret size is something other than 32.
But you would still be
So-
able to get that from the algorithm, or do you expect it to maybe be dynamic?
Right. Based on the current construction of Chem, I mean, we've embedded it here in the algorithm identifier, so it would always return key.algorithm.shared secret size in bytes.
Yeah, so I mean, what I'm getting at is like, maybe would it make sense to have this as like a Boolean instead of an int? This kind of brings back the try, but I don't know.
It's tempting to just delete the second overload and be like, make your span the right size, prove you know.
I mean,
Or if
we
you
can
don't
certainly
have
say
different
somebody just has to call, they have to pass in .slice. Yeah, I was gonna say the concern would be that they called .slice when they called decapsulate and then don't pay attention to respecting that slice later, but that just means they're gonna think more of their buffer secret than it is, hopefully.
And they could have already done that, right? This is literally just removing an overload. Like they could have already called this overload that way and used the unsliced buffer.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean,
So-
I'm fine with saying, or we can add it later.
Yeah, the fact that it feels weird and we can add it later makes me just, maybe make people ask for it since I'm assuming we think the first overload would be used more often.
In general, I would expect people to either use the one that does the allocations for them, or I would expect people to use the ones that are give me precisely sized buffers. Where it does
So the
get
top two.
weird, though, where it does get weird though is for the ones that actually do encapsulation with the ciphertext. The ciphertext isn't a fixed size like the shared secret. You're almost certainly going to look that up from the algorithm. And at that point, an out int for the ciphertext byte written makes a little more sense. Maybe less so for shared secret. So when we get to encapsulate, it feels weird that we're going to say, okay, out int for ciphertext makes sense. It doesn't make sense for shared secret. So in that
I think it's
sense,
that weird.
kind of.
We could just leave it out, right? The shared secrets byte written on and require that it's the right size. so it's validated. Like, I think as long as you require that it has exactly the right size, I don't
Yes.
think it's weird.
Okay. Okay, so then, and then the more obvious one for the first overload with the one that does bytes is you give it a ciphertext as an input, and it decapsulates it to a shared secret as an output, and it does all the nice allocations for you. And for encapsulate, the general way you can mentally model what encapsulate does is it returns a tuple, but we're not actually returning a tuple or a tuple or however you want to pronounce it. It produces a shared secret and it produces a ciphertext. That's more obvious in encapsulate core, where, sorry, before we move on, did we wrap up decapsulate, or am I just speeding through it?
I'm happy if we remove the one with the out. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
I guess the thing to specifically say here is this is the future. So the abstract is written in terms of span. So if you're in a language that doesn't let you work with spans, you don't get to derive this type without making an intermediate of your own.
Right. And I think that's pretty reasonable. It just needs to be consumable by other languages.
Right.
PowerShell, for example, I think, and VB.NET can't work directly with spans very easily, but they can with byte arrays. So back to encapsulate. Encapsulate core produces two outputs, a ciphertext and a shared secret. The size of those are also known based on the MLChem algorithm. By the time things reach encapsulate core, the expectation is that the spans are precisely sized. The second from bottom overload that does encapsulate basically takes a span ciphertext, a span shared secret, and it has two out ints for how much was written to both. That's so based on what we did to decapsulate, we could argue that we don't need the out ints at all and have just the overload above. This is a very similar thing where this overload is I have buffers that are big enough, and the one above it is I have buffers that are exactly the right size. I don't see a compelling reason to keep the out int returning ones if we didn't want to
for
decapsulate.
Ciphertext bytes written, is that like always the same value?
It is not always going to be the same value by algorithm. It will always be the same by the MLChem algorithm. So if you want to know how big your ciphertext is going to be, you say MLChem algorithm.ciphertext size in bytes.
Yeah. So it will always be key.algorithm.ciphertext size in bytes.
Okay. So one reason I felt like really comfortable about leaving the out for shared secret is because it is validating that the size is exact. With ciphertext, it would be exact or larger, or would we just be enforcing that?
This
for both?
overload is exact. It's
okay.
It's you need to pass a buffer that is exactly algorithm.ciphertext size in bytes long. The one that has the outs is allowing larger, so that you say, I don't care what size MLChem you give me, I have a buffer that's big enough. Just tell me how big it was, because I just need to know what to flush down the network pipe.
Yeah, I think it's fine to leave out the last overload, given that you can query the algorithm for whatever the size is or whatever, or just enumerate it. Seems fine.
Yep. Yeah, that matches my expectation from what we did with the encapsulate.
Is there a reason that we want to enforce that it's exact and not larger than in these cases?
So for this version,
Yeah.
where it's not telling you how many bytes it wrote, it's just making sure that you're aware that when you're about to send the ciphertext to somebody else, you may have rented a megabyte buffer. You may have used an array pool and it rounded up to a megabyte. But don't send that whole megabyte down the wire, because then somebody's going to reject it as an invalid encapsulation ciphertext. So it's the prove you know what you're doing when you call these span overloads. And if you don't know what you're doing, just call the array returning ones.
Mhm.
So it's think of it as an intelligence test.
We did something similar with AES GCM. When you do encrypt or decrypt with AES GCM, the writable buffer must always match the size of the input buffer. And if you don't know what you're doing, use the array stuff. So some prior art for being specific about buffer sizes. For the second from top encapsulate, it's an interesting one. It writes to a precisely sized buffer, but returns an allocated ciphertext. And then for the encapsulate above, we have an out byte of the shared secret that also returns an allocated ciphertext.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, so I'll say the thinking there, when I was doing the early modeling for what MLChem might look like, I considered doing a named tuple of the shared secret and the ciphertext. The problem is, if we just give you a tuple of 2 byte arrays, it just felt too easy to get them backwards. But if one's an out and the other's a return, that feels harder to get backwards, and then we're at least consistent with sort of the ordering. The reason for having a byte returning one and a span writing one is the shared secret is small, you can stack allocate it, and in fact what you're supposed to do with the shared secret is then derive some other key based off of it. So you're going to encapsulate, get a shared secret, run it through a KDF, erase it. You don't care about the shared secret anymore. But the ciphertext, you're going to send over the network, and most of our networking things want byte arrays.
I would almost, I mean, this does look awkward. What about a struct with like a 2 argument constructor then without a destructuring, which would make it easy to flip?
I mean, we could. It would be used only for this one method.
Yeah. How worried are we about flipping, really? I prefer the named value tuple.
The other consideration for value tuple is, since this targets down level, it would force folks to take a dependency on system.value tuple package, which I guess isn't a big deal, but it would be yet another reason that people are yanking in system value tuple.
Yeah,
I would almost prefer our own struct that just destructures or deconstructs than pull in value tuple. But
it would be one thing if we were like consistent on like what the return value of decapsulate and encapsulate were when it was a byte array, right? But like, and maybe this makes sense to people who use it, but right, it's the shared key for decapsulate, right? Or the shared secret rather. And then for encapsulate, it's the.
You can kind of think of them as inverting each other.
They are inverted, which is fair. Yeah, I guess that's fair.
Yeah,
And I mean, the words do convey that.
They're sort of encrypt and decrypt, except really what they are is generate a random number, call encrypt, and then return the random number and the encrypted result.
Right, but both of them return you the shared secret, which makes that weird. So it's not like it's the exact inverse. Like it's not like, one gives it to you and the other you give it to it. If it was that, then sure, argument all the way.
Yeah, I mean, I'll also say that my hope would be that C# users call this one if they want the allocating one at all, so that they should be writing the shared secret to a provided buffer and then getting back the ciphertext so they can send it. The reason for having this one at all is VB.
Yeah, and I assume
Like,
C# deals with this.
I would
fine
rather
and
cut
going
it than
to-
return a tuple, and then that would just be saying VB can't use this type. That's my personal opinion.
Would VB be completely unable to use the type without that?
VB literally runs. You know how C# 7.3 puts like a hidden obsolete on ref structs that the that smart C# compilers know how to ignore. Yeah, VB.net does not know that at all. It will just run as soon as it runs into anything that touches a ref struct. It just hits that obsolete and says, "I can't compile." The other use case here is PowerShell as well. That some feedback we've had in previous API designs is that at least, I don't know if it's changed, spans were a little unwieldy with PowerShell.
Okay, how about this to make it a little bit more consistent, Jeremy? Or yeah, both of you also, Kevin. If we made the out byte shared secret what we do for the first overload of decapsulate and make that also void, then at least the shared secret's like always an out.
I mean, we could. There's the argument that this is weird, but it makes sense. There's also the other thing we could do is make them both outs. So that way you're at least consistent about the way that they are. So
right.
The method returns a void. You have out shared secret, out ciphertext. The second one becomes writable shared secret and an out byte ciphertext, and they're both void. That's a little weird, though. Well, no, actually, it would be okay because it's an out.
I mean, what would be weird about that one is the rule, like the guideline that says outs go last means it would be shared secret, ciphertext, but then the span one is ciphertext shared secret. I mean,
I don't think
we
you
can flip
need.
it.
Do you need the mix? Okay, I mean, I get that it's convenient because it's dynamic, right? Ish. No, it's not dynamic. So, do we need the one with byte and span, like the second one?
Like that one was just based on the notion that you need to the return value of encapsulate you're sending to somebody else. So it probably needs to be an array, or if not an array, a memory. And so that means that the caller would have to pre-allocate it, call to get the writing, and then send it on down the line. We can say they have to do that. This overload it saves you a line of code. So we can...
Yeah, I wouldn't mind removing the second one and doing the void double out array with the same order as the spans. Seems consistent and cleanish, and it's only an extra line of code for that one scenario.
Well,
yeah, and I think one of the
what
arguments
extension method
you had
I'm always
was-
writing.
One of the arguments you had was that it could be stack allocated, and maybe in the future there might be algorithms where the shared secret is very large and you might not want to stack allocate it, so it might not have value to have span overload.
I mean, I would if it changes, I would expect 32 becomes 64, not 32 becomes 10K. So
yeah. But well, when I originally did the implementation, the second overload didn't exist, so I would be okay without the span writing shared secret one. And if you really want spans, you can just use the exact buffered ones.
Seems good to me. And then do double out byte array for the first overload.
Yes, could do that.
Yep.
Jeremy, are you typing off screen? Can I
yeah, I'm typing off screen.
eyeball what what
Yeah, just
what
a
all
moment.
this looks like?
Um,
Yeah.
now we get to watch my new keyboard, Hunted Pack. And then this goes void.
Yeah. I like it.
I am bizarrely amused that out byte bracket is the same length as span of byte.
It does have that nice vertical line or lineup. So
Dip it. I mean, yeah, this is
Approved.
this isn't divine intervention. I don't know what is. The exact same number of characters.
Because it's out space versus span. So yeah, it's true for any sized array, or any array versus span. That was not intentional, as far as I know, in the name of span.
Okay. So, I think that wraps up encapsulate. Just in case anybody asks, for the span writing ones, it will not allow you to have overlapping buffers. Your ciphertext and your shared secret cannot touch each other. They can be adjacent if they're sharing a buffer, but if they overlap, it will throw. Okay. So moving on to throw if disposed.
Yeah.
What did we want to say
So-
on throw if disposed?
I'll, because this is me and several people have said it's weird. So, and I said I'll let the review group have an opinion. The design that I came up with when prototyping all of this is the base class already knows if it's disposed because it's going to have a lot of reasons it's going to throw. So like, if you call encapsulate, it's going to see it's disposed and not call encapsulate core. So the base class knows it's disposed. So if the derived type has any extra functionality and it cares if it's disposed, why should it track its own disposed state? So I included a protected void throw if disposed. So you can't ask if you're disposed, but you can say just throw the same exception that all the other methods would have if we're disposed. I don't know that we've ever done this anywhere else, but I think it makes sense.
Watch someone turn it into a property with try catch. No, I don't think we'll ever do that. Overwriting. I don't know if I've ever seen it. Most of the time, people just don't care, right? And then they'll just like call the base APIs and they'll throw the object disposed exceptions. But if you're tracking your own resources in the derived class, I could see that.
Yeah.
Wanting to gate that.
I mean, it's really if you were to get something. So, if we hadn't made the array allocating ones, right? It's if a derived type wanted to make the array allocating methods, then do they allocate and then call the base method and then find out they were disposed, or do they get to preempt the work with throw if disposed and then not allocate the array to find out it was wasted? So
I would do. I mean, it's public API. I would honestly probably just waste the allocation, right? Like, who cares? You should, like, it's an object disposed exception. It shouldn't be happening. This should only hopefully be happening in debugging tests and stuff.
fair enough. So are you saying don't bother with the protected method and let people re-implement it if they care?
Yeah. Not a strong feeling, but yeah, it's just like there's so many classes we could put this on if we thought this was the right thing to do, and I just seems like unnecessary boilerplate.
Fair enough. I would like it to be stated for the record, I do occasionally try new things, and this is what happens. All right.
If you really wanted to try something new, you'd stop using the dispose pattern. No, just kidding.
I tried something new. I broke my keyboard in half.
Oh,
That's not true. I bought a Moonlander. They broke it in half for me. All right, we have
Okay.
5 minutes left in the meeting. Do you think there's a good 5-minute topic before we break across sessions?
I mean, I think we can get through the exports of not including the spooky and the PKCS8. So MLChem, being an asymmetric algorithm, has two kinds of keys: the decapsulation key and the encapsulation key. You can export, and there's actually a third kind of key, which we'll get to at the end. The decapsulation key, you can get it. If your implementation allows exporting it, we'll give you a byte array. And we also have a span writing one, again, precisely sized destination. The capsulation key size is, again, a property off of MLChem algorithm. So if you want to write to a pre-allocated buffer and you need to know how big your buffer should be, use key.algorithm.decapsulation key size in bytes. And it follows our core pattern. We have the same thing for encapsulate, except encapsulate is the public portion of the key. It does the encryption or the encapsulation. And then we get to private seed. Private seed is something, without getting too in the weeds on how MLChem works, the private seed is a small value. It is 64 bytes. And it is used as an input to generating decapsulation keys and encapsulation keys. The reason why it's exposed separately from decapsulation key is because it's compact. A decapsulation key can be, I think, worst case, 3 kilobytes. It's in that FIPS 203 table. I don't have it off the top of my head.
3168.
Yeah. So some standards and specifications have said, okay, well, instead of carrying around these enormous private keys, all you really need to care about is the private seed, which is 64, which makes, putting them in like PFX or something or whatever, compact and easy to carry around. Some other folks in standards bodies said, no, using the private seed doesn't work for us. We need to work on a decapsulation keys. The private seed creates decapsulation and encapsulation keys. If you have just the decapsulation key, you cannot get the private seed back out. It's a one-way thing, going seed to decapsulation key, but you can't go from decapsulation key to private seed. That's more relevant when we get to the PKCS8 stuff, but that's what a private seed is it's there for another form of private key. But it works like the others. It returns a byte array, or you can write to a destination. Again, you're writing to a destination and you want to know how big the destination should be, it's going to be key.algorithm.private seed size in bytes. And we're at time. We've finished up all of the instance things. Maybe we're at a good breaking point to continue this next week.
Yep, especially because it looks like a lot of people have dropped. So at this point, we wouldn't even have quorum on decisions anymore. Wow, I said at this point and anymore. How efficient of me.
I did want to call out one thing that's different from MLDSA, just to bring it up before I forget about it. gosh, I need to look at MLDSA, and this is really kind of just an anecdote here. For MLDSA, the names follow a slightly different convention.
Have the secret key and public key.
We specifically put the algorithm names in these things. We don't have export private seed. We have export MLDSA private seed. So, and we do the same thing with encapsulation and decapsulation key. For MLDSA, it's export MLDSA decapsulation key. Export MLDSA, or not, it's not encapsulation key. It's private key and public key. You know what I mean? Secret key and public key. The point is the algorithm name is in there. I thought it was redundant because it's MLChem, and it seems weird to say MLChem.export MLChem key. But
I'm with you.
Yeah, well,
did we already ship the MLDSA stuff?
No, we haven't reviewed it yet.
No.
Okay.
So I'll say the reason MLDSA got shoved in there is because its keys names are so generic that I didn't want them to be mistaken for like the PKCS8 interchange format. But decapsulation key and encapsulation key are pretty algorithm specific. Private seed I can go either way. But MLDSA calls it like secret key and public key. And it's like, well, that is what they're called, but this is the format specific to MLDSA's secret key. So it's like RSA with the RSA private key and RSA public key data formats.
That makes sense. My preference for MLChem would be to leave them out, including private seed, because it feels, I mean, their private seed can't be interpreted as a different data format. It's the private seed is the private seed.
Yep.
But I did want to call out that is one of the deviations from the initial prototype, is that I took the algorithm names out.
Fair enough. Yeah, like I said, for private seed I can go either way, but for MLDSA, definitely it was that the public and private key format names were a little too friendly. So I needed to make them less general sounding.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I think we'll end up covering the key names again, since we'll be talking about the import and we'll have more people back in the room. But it is a good thing to keep in mind as a future comparison. So, all right. Well, thank you for walking through what we got through, Kevin. And this tells me that we're probably looking at 30 minutes to complete. So I'll know how to slot that in for next week. Oh, I have notes. Notes.
All right. See you, everyone.
See ya.
See ya.
Alright, so procedurally calling it needs work so it shows up in the minutes, but then I'll flip it back to ready for review right after I hit publish on the minutes. So don't be scared.
Do you have a marker or somewhere of continue from here next time?
One day I will learn how to type again. Boop. Alright, and thanks everyone for joining us, especially people who don't care about crypto and stuck through to the end. We did have some comments. Ooh, not approved. And
That just made my life a lot easier.
yeah, mine too. So yeah, thanks for sticking with us. This one, of course, will float over into next session, and then next time we'll probably also be talking about more of the tensor stuff again. They said they wanted a couple weeks off to give some other things to flow through, and looks like we already have a blocking issue that'll jump to the front of next week. So yeah, so we'll see you here, or not, I guess. Same .NET time, same .NET channel. Until then, auf Wiedersehen. Grab the gavel first. Ciao.